You avoid thinking about death, so you end up avoiding life too, putting off the difficult conversation, the career change, the person you want to become. Marcus Aurelius said the fear of death is the fear of living. Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome in 161 AD, inheriting an empire of 60 million people, constant war, and a plague that killed millions. He was the most powerful human being alive, yet he woke each morning knowing he could die that day. His private journal, what we now call Meditations, reveals a man writing to himself about mortality constantly. Not because he was depressed, but because he understood something most of us refuse to face. Death is the condition that gives life meaning. He wasn't alone in this. The Stoics before him, Seneca, Epictetus, Zeno, all treated contemplating death as a daily practice. They lived in a world where mortality was visible: wars, disease, execution. Philosophy wasn't abstract theory, it was survival wisdom. The core principle is memento mori, Latin for remember you must die. But it's not what you think. The Stoics didn't dwell on death to become pessimistic. They used mortality as a lens to see what actually matters. Marcus wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Not morbid, clarifying. When you remember that your time is finite, the trivial complaints dissolve. The ego battles feel absurd. The psychological mechanism is this. Most anxiety comes from living as if we have infinite time. We postpone. We ruminate over small slights. We take people for granted. The awareness of death cuts through that illusion instantly. This isn't about being fatalistic. It's about recognizing that death is not the opposite of life. It's the deadline that makes life precious. A movie with no ending isn't meaningful. Neither is a life imagined as endless. The first technique is the evening reflection Marcus actually used. Every night before sleep, spend 2 minutes on this question. If I died tonight, what would I regret not saying or doing today? Not hypothetically, concretely. Did you snap at your partner over something meaningless? Did you avoid a difficult work conversation? Did you scroll for an hour instead of working on what you say matters to you? Write down one specific regret, then write what you'll do tomorrow to address it. This isn't guilt, it's calibration. You're using mortality as a mirror to see where you're living out of alignment with your actual values. Example, you realize you spent the evening arguing with strangers online while your daughter tried to show you her drawing. The regret is clear: disconnection from someone who matters. Tomorrow, you put the phone in another room after 6 p.m. The practice works because it creates a feedback loop. You notice the gap between how you're living and how you'd want to have lived if tonight were your last night. That gap becomes unbearable, so you close it. The second technique, mortality-based decision-making. When facing a choice that feels overwhelming, career change, ending a relationship, starting a project, ask this: what would I choose if I had 6 months to live? This isn't about being reckless. It's about stripping away the false urgencies. With 6 months left, you wouldn't care about what your college friends think of your career pivot. You wouldn't stay in the job that slowly kills your spirit for the illusion of security. The question reveals what you actually value versus what you've been taught to value. Most of our decisions are made to avoid judgment or maintain comfort. Mortality cuts through both. Concrete example: you're 34, in a stable corporate job that bores you, considering freelancing. Without the mortality frame, you list pros and cons forever. With it, the answer is instant. You'd absolutely try freelancing if time were short. That clarity doesn't mean quit tomorrow. It means you now know what you actually want. The question becomes practical. How do I move toward that while being responsible? You start the side projects, you cut expenses, you act. The third technique is what the Stoics called negative visualization, but applied to mortality specifically. Once a week, vividly imagine this is your last month alive. What changes? Not abstractly, sit with it. Picture your last conversation with your parents, the last time you see your home, the last morning you wake up next to your partner. Let yourself feel the weight of last, then return to your actual life. Notice what shifts. The argument you were rehearsing in your head all morning suddenly seems insane. The person sitting across from you at breakfast becomes precious. The work you were dreading becomes a gift. You get to do it. This is the gratitude reframe Marcus used constantly. He'd write about how his teachers and friends would die, how Rome would crumble, how nothing lasts. Not to depress himself, but to stop taking the present for granted. Example, you're frustrated with your aging father's repetitive stories. Do the visualization. This might be the last year you hear those stories. Suddenly, the frustration dissolves. You listen differently, the same moment, transformed by awareness. Here's the common pitfall. People think this practice makes you dark or nihilistic, that if nothing matters because we die, why try at all? This completely inverts the Stoic point. The Stoics weren't saying nothing matters because we die. They were saying everything matters more because we die. Finite time is what creates value. Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." The other mistake, using mortality to justify self-destructive urgency. Life is short, so I'll burn every bridge and chase pleasure. That's not Stoicism. That's panic. Marcus would say you're still fleeing death, just with different tactics. Real memento mori creates calm, not frenzy. It helps you distinguish between what's urgent and what's important. Most of what fills your day is neither. Death awareness gives you permission to ignore it without guilt. So here's what the Stoics actually discovered. Death isn't the enemy of life. Distraction is. Pretending you have infinite time is. Living on autopilot is. Death is just the wake-up call. Marcus Aurelius had every reason to avoid thinking about mortality. He had power, wealth, family, responsibility, but he meditated on death every single day, not because he was depressed, but because he wanted to be alive. When you remember you're going to die, something shifts in your body. The meeting you were dreading becomes just a meeting. The text you were obsessing over becomes just pixels. The person in front of you becomes someone you'll lose, so you actually see them. This practice doesn't make you morbid. It makes you present. The Stoics understood that the fear of death is really the fear of not having lived, so they used death as a tool to live fully right now. You don't have to be a philosopher or a Roman emperor to do this. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, if this were my last day, did I live it well? Then tomorrow, adjust. That's memento mori. That's how you stop fearing death, by finally starting to live. If this gave you something to think about, I'll see you in the next one.